John J. Klassen came to Canada from Russia in 1923. He was 22 years old with no real business experience. But less than 10 years later, in the middle of the worst economic depression in Canadian history, he started his own manufacturing business.
He started business in Winnipeg on Home Street, in the basement of a building that still exists. He went in partnership with someone who had shoe repair equipment, but they discovered early on that there wasn't a great deal of margin in this, and they had to move on to something else. The very next product they got into, I believe, was grain grinders and butter churners.
He greeted his employees with a handshake in the morning in the early years. In the 40s, he still did that. He was there before the first worker came through the door.
Over the next 30 years, he led the Monarch Machinery Company to amazing growth and prosperity.
Initially, he started with just a few items, but then it gravitated to more items. And the ones that were successful and that had a profit margin on, he would retain. If something wasn't very successful, or he had difficulty selling, or the quality wasn't up to what the expectations were, he would drop it.
It consumed him completely, but in a positive way. I mean, he was so excited when he was able to get that pump on the assembly line, and X number of hours later, that pump had been completed.
What was extraordinary about his entire business career was his ability to tackle new projects, acquire products that he felt could sell, identify those things, and then employ the people who could put it all together for him.
He went through some very hard times initially to get the business going.
Got into water pumps. Initially it was piston pumps, and then he moved into jet pumps.
There were 2 floods virtually back to back in Winnipeg, and that's where his business suddenly became very settled and was doing extremely well.
There were also hydraulics, which were used for agricultural equipment. There were castings that were made for other manufacturers that were adapted. There were hand pumps, that not only electric pumps, but hand pumps. There was contractors' equipment, including cement mixers.
I think he thought about everything thoroughly and clearly, and long term. He was very much what'll happen in 5 years, what'll happen in 10 years.
The metal castings are really where all of the profit was. And when the first foundry was put in place on Erin Street here in the city of Winnipeg, and that goes back into the early 40s, that's where the money really started to flow.
His workers tended to stay for a long time. The workers that started with them at their 25-year anniversary, he took them to Egypt. That was where they wanted to go.
Many of his videos that he would bring back would be not of the countryside or of the landscapes that they were traveling through, but they would be of businesses and companies that he would go to visit, specifically the car plants in Michigan.
He truly had the mind of an engineer and an architect, really. He loved to sit and sketch and draw plans.
His legacy is one of the largest manufacturing firms in the agricultural areas that is capable of manufacturing hydraulics, is capable of supplying other farm equipment manufacturers with castings that are first-rate, whether it's versatile manufacturing, whether it's jacuzzi water pumps that buys product from California, Red Jacket pumps in the United States. He was an entrepreneur that was successful and gave others the view that if he could be successful, others could succeed as well.